All right, back to the Trans-Pacific Partnership, and the Trade Minister, Steve Chobo, says there is the potential for countries like China to join the TPP. Joining me from Melbourne is Helen Sawczak, who's the CEO of the Australia-China Business Council. Thanks so much for joining us this afternoon. Helen, what do you think the chances are of China joining the TPP?
Well, it's highly likely both Indonesia and China are prospective partners of the TPP. The terms of reference of the partnership do allow consideration of new parties. So it's a distinct possibility. I mean, it's a great shame that the US has chosen not to pursue the TPP. The 12 countries stood to gain huge advantages with respect to access, not just access to Asian markets, particularly for those who don't have free trade agreements, but also other benefits like improvements to labour law and IP protection and environmental protection. So it's a great shame it hasn't proceeded.
All right, Australia already has a bilateral deal with China, so if China does get included into the TPP, what's in it for us?
Well, Australia had the vision and the foresight to negotiate a free trade agreement with China. So it's actually of great benefit to us in this current wave of protectionism and anti-globalisation that bilateral agreements have actually been heightened in significance. So while we wave this anti-globalisation wave, Australian business can only benefit with respect to from CHAFTA.
As you say, there is this anti-globalisation wave because there are losers too, aren't there? I mean, you know, for a lot of people, the term free trade means they're blue-collar jobs going. We have seen factory after factory in this country, like in America, close down where jobs have been exported overseas. There are a lot of losers too.
That's absolutely right, and this was an issue which was raised recently at the Boal Forum for Asia Conference in Melbourne. And there's a lot of misunderstandings with respect to globalisation. For instance, what you just mentioned, that there's a lot of there's a presumption out there that the loss of blue-collar jobs is because of globalisation, and in fact, there's other reasons for that. Globalisation is not to blame for all the problems. For instance, mechanisation of process often leads to manufacturing job losses. So there's a lot of misinformation with respect to globalisation at the moment.
But surely lower labour cost markets like China and India and the subcontinent, they do pick up a lot of work in the textiles industry, in the IT industry. I mean, iPhones are being made in China, they're not being made here or in the US, are they?
Absolutely, but all our economies are inextricably linked at the moment. So to take this protectionist, isolationist path, it's a path that China went down, and President Xi Jinping mentioned during his speech at the Davos conference last week that China tried the isolationist path and realised fairly quickly that it's of no benefit to their country. So our economies are inextricably linked in a globalised world at the moment.
So who do you think the winners in Australia are in terms of the industry sectors, in terms of freeing up trade throughout the Asian region? What industries in Australia will do well? Where will we see more jobs?
Well, there are a couple of key focuses that Australian business will prosper in. Financial services is a huge one. Tourism is another huge one. Construction and obviously education as well. So they're all key areas that will absolutely boom.
You mentioned earlier in the interview IP protection. Could you expand a bit more about that and why that is an increasing issue for companies all over the world?
Obviously, so some of the reactions this morning, especially from pharmaceutical and medtech US companies that were looking towards Asian market, obviously there are issues with respect to IP protection in some Asian markets, and the TPP was working towards providing guarantees with respect to that. So, and it would have given some assurance to US companies trying to enter the Asian market.
Have you heard much reaction out of China at this stage as to, you know, what they think about the US officially pulling out of the TPP and the speculation that perhaps China might join?
Not at this stage.
And okay, what if China doesn't join? What do you think that will mean for Australia in terms of trade throughout the rest of the Asian region?
Well, China has its own partnership collective it is negotiating. It obviously includes 16 countries. It's the Regional Comprehensive Economic Partnership. So whether that comes to the fore, we're yet to see. But it's certainly the Asia-Pacific area. There is a leadership vacuum being created by the US pulling out of the TPP, and it's a role that China will happily take up.
Helen Sawczak from the Australia-China Business Council. It's a fascinating time. Thanks so much for your insights today.
Pleasure.